Right, let's get into our first major discussion now. Nigerians have called for the reverse of the 2017 benchmark into higher institutions by the Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board.
They say the cutoff mark is below expectation and will bring down the quality of education in the country.
Are meant to be a guide to tertiary institutions while admitting candidates. The Joint Admission and Matriculation Board on Tuesday pegged the minimum cutoff marks for universities at 120. Polytechnics and colleges of education were pegged at 100, while innovative enterprise at 110.
For degree award courses, the minimum is 120 in JAMB. Agreed? The minimum for polytechnic is 100. And for colleges of education, the minimum is 100. For IEIs, it is 110.
Despite the decision reached that institutions are at liberty to go beyond the benchmarks, some Nigerians are not satisfied with this. They said the decision will do the education sector more harm than good. They believe candidates should score more than average to qualify for higher institutions.
Did I hear you say 120 for universities and 100 for polytechnic? Over what? 400? That's abnormal. It's unacceptable. It's unbelievable. That tells you the level at which our education is going has decayed.
The education sector is in a very bad shape. Education is almost gone. What JAMB is going to do is to heighten the corruption in an admission racketeering that is already cracking the education system. And I think that all the stakeholders must intervene.
If it is implemented favorably, it favors people who are eligible, who actually wanted to go to school. It makes them, it will give them the opportunity of even entering universities. It's okay as it is. If they can maintain it, if they approve it, they can go ahead with it.
They call on stakeholders to kick against the policy as it will only ridicule the educational system in Nigeria. With this cutoff mark set up by JAMB, there are chances that candidates will find it easier gaining admission into institutions of their choice.
Very shocking for some people there. Somebody said, did I hear you say 120 cutoff marks for universities? You know, when we were in school, there was something when we were trying to gain admission. There was a policy of educationally advantaged and educationally disadvantaged states.
Yeah.
And, you know, of course, the disadvantaged ones were given some kind of, you know...
soft landing.
Yes,
yeah.
Lower marks and all of that.
Exactly.
But, you know, we don't even know what is going on right now. But we still have the Group General Manager of the Daily Times, Olisa Ebunike, with us this morning. Of course, when we were looking at the papers, we did get your reaction. But Ishaq Oloyede, Professor Ishaq Oloyede, the JAMB registrar, has said that the reduction in cutoff marks for 2017-2018 will not in any way, it does not portend any danger for Nigerian education. And in his words, it does not translate into a fall in education standards. So what are the implications?
I think I am surprised that the registrar of JAMB will condescend to such argument and discussion. Because let's go back, this borders on the issue of research. One of the things is that we don't go back to history and evaluate policies the way they should be evaluated. Over 50 years, I had you during the time break discussing about when you were in school. There were educationally disadvantaged and there was some soft landing provided from people classified. What has happened? Between those states and the states that were classified as educationally advanced states, the gap has continued to widen. The more you keep on putting policies that will not bridge the gap, that will not make education competitive, education is not an atielago dance issue. It's not a bata dance issue. Education is not everybody should go through the university system.
In other words, it's not an all-comers affair.
It's not an all-comers affair because the development we're talking about or we are noticing in Europe, in the United States, even in Southeast Asia today, wasn't a tea party. It took them time. The China that closed their doors for more than 30 years, they went through education. They reviewed the processes and procedures, and over time, they actually attained the level they've reached themselves. And they've not stopped, they've continued. So what we have done now is that we have widened the gap between the so-called education advanced state and the education disadvantaged state. So what they are trying to say now is that if you bring the disadvantaged or the the challenged states and put them, what you have said is that it will take them another 50 years to meet the educationally advanced stage. You keep on shifting the goalposts. What they have done is that they have, for me, because this is an electronic medium, let me use a word that will portray me in a bad light. What they have done is that they lack capacity. What the people in JAMB and some stakeholders that took that decision is that they've told us, I've been sure that they don't have the need, they don't have the capacity to remain in that position.
All right, now let's look at the importance of that entry examination. We've seen it, one would say, well, the process of training is most important than the test you have to pass to qualify for entering into the training, because JAMB is just a one-day examination. But JAMB as an entry standard, or the standard by which you have to pass before you go into training in this institution, how important is JAMB as a test or as a benchmark?
I understand you pass through various schools. Nowhere in the world have you had a better option than the examination. It's always a one-day affair, and it's always graduated. In the universities, you have examinations that are for 2 hours, 1.5 hours, and you pass through that, and you prepared. It's been always that there is a procedure for everything. We've not had a better alternatives. What we are trying to do is that to lower standards and call it the new option. That is what we are trying to do. Education, examination is always the issue, the benchmark for evaluating your understanding and appreciation of what we are taught over time. There is no means, again, all over globally, to evaluate any human being in any capacity.
Other than
examination. So what I cannot see, even, I am not a professor of mathematics, but 100 and 120 over 400 is not a pass mark.
The original benchmark at 180 was already
was an issue.
It was lower than 50%.
Yes.
And now that you bring it to somewhere
about
35%, 30%, oh. Ooh, so now the newly agreed marks would override the ones submitted already by the institutions.
Even if you see the issue, the registrar, the way he put it as if they were in the State House of Assembly, do you agree that is the voice vote on issue? It shows us that there was not even a real stakeholders meeting to evaluate it, because the evaluation will be based on empirical evidence. What has happened? Over the years, we've evaluated it, we've used the 180.
Come up with.
Why? What is the reason, the rationale behind? So, you see, it was politically motivated. There is all you need to do over time. I remembered when the Pakistanians, when the Indians were brought into the educational system in this country.
The Ghanaians.
Yes.
Ghanaians.
How did it help us? The issue, let me tell you, is that Nigeria has refused to accept that we are one nation, because we have the manpower down south to help people that are educationally advanced. In some parts of Nigeria, we have the manpower. But what you begin to see is that when you move to certain states in Nigeria, instead of taking you in because of the capacity you have, they give you a contract. Not to bring you into the... I keep saying what has happened in Lagos over time, in Lagos State, although it's another issue, is that Lagos, do you have the capacity to meet our obligation towards education, the employee, no matter where you come from? And that is what has not been happening in so many other states.
Is it possible that this decision, the thinking behind this, is to give some kind of advantage to a certain part of the country that seems to be left behind educationally?
It's obvious. It has always been happening for the past 50 years. It's obvious that that was actually the decision, the moderating factor towards that policy of lowering it. And you notice that there is nothing you can do. The policy has actually made it impossible for people in other parts of Nigeria that have capacity to help bridge the gap in the so-called educational disadvantaged state. Because when you want to go there, the issue they will bring up is that they will not give you a normal service contract. They will make sure that you sign on a contract. They can deal with you. You can imagine Nigeria, you working in Nigeria saying, I am working in River State, I am in Nigeria, and instead of bringing me in to work in the civil service, I will work on a contract basis. What it means that my total take home will be very, minimal compared to what.
Exactly.
So that is
the
actually
issues of indigenship. You're not an indigene.
Yes, you are not from this state and all this, where you are lacking in capacity. Now, the states or the climes where they are bringing manpower from Pakistan, from India, from Ghana, they need those manpower, and they will not want to come to Nigeria. Because they have a better option in their own countries that come into.
And they have deliberate policies too to ensure that their people stay within their
stay within the country, because you have to retain that manpower, professionalism and skill.
Definitely.
When the marks were dropped to 180, a lot of, from the reports we got, lots of parents started moving and planning for their children to go school in Ghana, go school in Gambia and other countries and all of that. But what is the implication of that in the long run?
You see, when I hear about people moving their children to this, it's not. Let me tell you one thing, is that when I was going to school, as a primary school student or people, there is nowhere in the world that you will mention that I will not give you their history. As if it took me time to travel to the US, but there's no place in US that I don't know, and I don't know what obtains there. That is the level of education we have. There was what was called civic in those days.
Yes.
And when you study it, the average Nigerian youth, as at that particular time, carry the map of the world and tell you the important areas of the world. That was the level of education. And you can name the prime ministers, the head of state, and every other thing. But today, what do we have? We still have that capacity. But it's the policies of government at whichever level that is militating sustained development of that education.
Now, in coming up with this, JAMB has given some level of autonomy to the universities to decide how they want to admit, who they want to admit, and all of that. Well, the schools are saying this is a good move.
That is what kills the policies. You will make a policy and you create a window that will, that will rubbish the whole policy. That is exactly, in those days, universities were allowed to actually conduct their examination and set their standards. The different universities set their standard. In those days, University of Nigeria, University of Lagos,
Ibadan.
They conduct ABU. They conduct examinations at different dates, and they have different cutoff marks. So if you are not qualified, you are not qualified. You wait for another day and go for rehearsal.
Okay. Well, we have to leave you here now. Group Managing Director of Daily Times, Olisa Egbunike, thank you very much for coming on the program.
It's a pleasure allowing me to be in your studio.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Right. All right, we'll look forward to more reactions from this, because the papers are all awash with the news on the JAMB cutoff point.